each rat gets trained to go to one particular basketball hoop. I'm going to give them a few basketballs to choose from and see what they can do. Tilly may be the starting here. There we go. They're very talented. They both like this basketball. I think they have just the right size hole chewed in that one for their tastes, but I'll try and keep it over on Florence's side. Tilly's gonna take it. There.
Yay!
The rats learn step by step how to poke the ball with their nose, pick it up in their teeth, dunk it with this booster platform, and then dunk it without the booster platform. It normally takes about 3 or 4 months for them to learn. It took Tilly 3.5 months. It took Florence about 4 or 5 months to get to the point that she's at. Technically, Florence never finished training, but that's okay. The final step is learning how to carry the ball. Traveling is actually encouraged for rat basketball. And Florence just never felt like it. It's all right. She's just happy playing the way that she does. But that's why I have some extra basketballs in here. If they really were doing a one-on-one with one basketball, Tilly would pick up the ball, carry it over here and dunk, and then the game would be over because Florence would never be able to know how to get it back over her side. But as long as she's got it ball over in her corner, she's happy, keep playing. She does a pretty good job, too.
Good job.
My turn. And each time they do something correct, even during training, they get a treat. So they learn through a process that we call positive reinforcement. Back in the 1930s, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner was studying how we learn, and how we learn specifically through consequences, what happens to us after we try something. And positive reinforcement is the name he gave to the consequence where you get something that you like and it makes you want to repeat the behavior, like getting a treat, or even just a pat on the head or praise. Or it doesn't have to be somebody giving you something. It could just be, if you figure out that something works really well, it gets you the result you want, you might keep trying that same technique again. There we go. In the 1960s, a couple of his students got together and decided to teach raccoons to play basketball. They were the first basketball playing animals. And they actually discovered some pretty interesting stuff with them too, because the raccoons were really good at playing basketball. They could pick up the ball with their paws even better than the rats do. But they did not have quite as much success teaching them to put a penny into a piggy bank. In theory, it's a similar task. You're teaching them to pick up an object and put it into the receptacle. But the raccoons actually liked the penny more than their treat. They didn't want to trade one for the other. So they wrote this whole paper about how animals, human beings included, of course, we're animals too, we have some behaviors that are learned over time and some behaviors that are instinct. And sometimes those instinct behaviors, like collecting cool objects for the raccoons or chewing up the basketball for the rats, sometimes those things are just more fun than their learned behavior. So they call that instinctual drift. It's not too big of a deal in rat basketball. Every now and then you'll see the rats decide to take a break, or sometimes they even take the day off completely if they just don't feel like getting treats on that particular instance. But that's okay. Animals with more serious jobs, though, like seeing eye dogs, rescue dogs, just go through a lot more training to make sure that they can focus on their task and their job. But one other thing that the Borellins were their name, they were a married couple, so same last name, the raccoon basketball trainers, they discovered that the best way of training animals, whatever type they are, is with positive reinforcement. So we don't use any kind of penalties in rat basketball. There's no punishment for dunking on the wrong hoop, or not dunking at all, or missing, traveling, stealing. Because if we did that, for one thing, it wouldn't be very nice, but it also wouldn't work. It wouldn't make them better basketball players to know that dunking on the wrong hoop got them some kind of punishment. It would just make them not want to play basketball ever again. So we use that for animals like seeing eye dogs and rescue dogs too. They get positive reinforcement when they do their jobs correctly, but anything else, they just get ignored. So these two rats are pretty focused today, but it happens a lot of the time that partway through the game, they'll decide to jump up here and walk around the outside edge of the basketball court. That's okay, they've got a really good sense of balance, and as long as they don't jump out, I won't stop them. But I'm not going to give them a treat for it either, because if I gave them a treat for jumping up here, then they would learn to do that instead of playing basketball. So the way we've gotten trained, they'll play for as long as they're hungry and they want a treat, and then they'll take a break to do something else when they want to do that too. If you have pets at home, you've trained your pets this way, maybe on purpose, but accidentally counts too. Your pets will learn certain behaviors are okay. Like you can't have your dog just jump up on the couch sometimes and not other times because they'll get confused. But one way that you're training your pets all the time is a little bit before B.F. Skinner. There's another scientist, really arguably more famous, named Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov did an experiment where he taught dogs to drool at the sound of a bell ringing. So what he did is he had his dogs in his laboratory. He was actually studying digestion at first and not behavior, but he switched a little bit later on in his life. And he found that the dogs in his experiment would start to drool too soon because he wanted to measure the saliva and all this cool stuff that goes into breaking down your food. But it was getting in the way of his experiments because the dogs had learned that every time they got brought into the laboratory, they were going to get fed, so they started to anticipate food. So what he did to kind of solve this problem is he would ring a bell every time he fed the dogs so that eventually he could control the start of the digestive process, the start of them drooling, by ringing the bell. They would hear the bell, think of food, and start to salivate. About, I guess, maybe 40, 50 years later, that was in 1904, so in the mid-1900s, the first TV advertisers started to take inspiration from Pavlov, and they would make things like commercial jingles or hear ice cream truck music. It's all based on the same kind of thing. But for your pets, you might have a dog who knows the sound of the bag of treats opening up, or a cat who knows the can opener running, or a fish who follows your finger up and down the glass of the aquarium. Here for rat basketball, we use a training clicker, but only for the little rats. So these two don't respond to it too much anymore. We teach them that that click means it's time for a treat. So as they go through all these different steps of their training, each time they do something correctly, we click the clicker, and that kind of allows us to communicate with them, and they can hear that click and know that it's something right. The most important step of training for the clicker to be involved in, at least, is learning how to dunk the ball, because we put this little platform in here. We put this little ring in and put in the basketball. This is just another style of basketball. We hide a treat underneath the ball, and rats have got a really good sense of smell. So they'll jump up here, they'll smell that there's a treat under the ball, they'll pick up the ball, toss it out of the way, and maybe every 1 in 20 times the ball will go over here and fall through the hoop completely accidentally. The rats don't know what they're doing when they do that, but we click the clicker at exactly the moment the ball falls through the hoop. So they hear that food sound, they know that they got a treat for whatever just happened, and some rats pick up on this right away. Florence actually figured out that dunking the ball is the goal of the game in just about a day or so. Tilly, I know you wouldn't believe it looking at her now, took her about a month to realize that the ball is supposed to go through the hoop. But once she figured it out, she breezed through the rest of training. Like I said, she finished training in about 3 months. Florence took about 4 or 5. I've had some rats learn in 2 weeks. I've had some take over a year, so you never quite know when you're getting started with a new group who's gonna learn most quickly. But it really, more than anything, comes down to how much they like food. If a rat really loves treats, then they'll work a lot harder and focus more on it too. Let's get Florence here to get one more point. I'll give her a break because, yeah, Tilly is getting full. She's had a lot of treats, so she wants to jump up here and climb around instead. I don't know, actually, trust Tilly up top on the basketball court as much. She won't jump out. Not on purpose anyway, but she gets up here and sometimes she'll just run back and forth. Always afraid she'll slip. But she will jump. Got under her travel box. There. You want to go to Florence. There you go. If you've got any questions about rats training, feel free to ask. If you want to come up and take a look at them in their travel box, please feel free to. Very cute. I'll put it over here.
Little city. What kind of treats do you get?
So these two negotiated me up to Cheerios. I usually just try and use grape nuts, but they didn't like grape nuts as much, so I had to start mixing in some other things. And then eventually, this is actually very funny to see with Florence, she won't even eat the grape nut now. She'll spit it out and go dunk the ball again.
Oh.
So, but most rats like the grape nuts, and they'll play for them. Well, if you're still here later today, at 3:30, I'm going to dissect a cow's eyeball in here. That's our next live science demonstration.